Alright, so I had been kind of building this issue in my brain a while with specifically, obviously the topic of today's video is Nightfall mission rotations. Now, I know Bungie has been steadily adding more and more things to the official strike playlist, improving or at least expanding the bounds of what can be considered a Nightfall, but at this point, Bungie, you gotta tone it down a little bit. So, in the past, one of the biggest complaints I had with the Nightfall rotation was that Glassway seemed to be their favorite strike. And for Glassway being one of the tougher Nightfalls available at the time, it seemed like it happened way too often and was always the weapon that was wanted and was hard to farm for the average person, even with me considering myself average. I regularly run GMs. I'm Conqueror 9. I've been Conqueror Gilded until ever since it could have been gilded. And even still, when Glassway comes around, I groan because it's just an annoying ordeal, whether it's for farming or just getting the one clear for just saying I have Conqueror and never going back to that strike. Now, the main issue, of course, there has been issues with the press. Like I said, I think there was a section of 4 or 5 seasons where Glassway was a part of the Nightfall rotation 5 seasons in a row. If not that, it was at least like 3 or 4. And then last season we had PsyOps Battleground being the hardest Nightfall, Lightblade right next to it, which is the other pretty much hardest Nightfall. The season before that we had Heist Battleground Mars, which was another hardest battleground of all time. Now, I get that they wanted to spice things up and make things not so regular. If you just have the same set of 10 Nightfalls and you can only pick 6 a season, you're going to start having repetitiveness. And I get that, but just look at the available rotations of Nightfall this season. If you look at the Conqueror title, you can see exactly what's there. So we have a Lightblade, a repeat from last season. Scarlet Keep, not so terrible, but at the same time, it is still one of the medium hardest ones. And then also Devil's Lair, which is, I'd say, a medium difficulty. If you put your head to it, it's pretty solid, not too terrible. But then we get to the rest, which is all 3 Heist Battlegrounds. Bungie, what in the ever-living hell were you thinking? Heist Battleground Mars, next to the PsyOps Battleground Moon, was literally the contender for the hardest Nightfalls ever since. And literally, you can see right here, I'm Conqueror 9. I've been running Grandmasters every season and at least completing everything once. Once upon a time, Proving Grounds was the hardest. Then Corrupted was the hardest. And then Lightblade was the hardest. And 100% now I'm saying any of these 3 could be contenders for the hardest. It's not even because of the heist and the laser grids or anything like that. That's just a little jump puzzle. I'm talking about the boss fights and the criteria for completing. Specifically in terms of Mars, you had to hold and defend 3 locations which had infinite and quite voluminous spawns of adds. Now, the whole issue with these is I get the difference. When it's a normal strike, there's patterns, there's spawns. With the Lightblade, you know, once you get to the pause part, you get a Lightborn Knight, you get 2 boss bar yellows, and midway through sections, you get a few champions and adds, with Alakul basically running wild. This is hard because of the setting and the ad density. Corrupted is hard because even though it is a relatively small arena, there is little cover, and they do throw a large wave of ads at you all at once that you need massive amounts of crowd control to keep a lid on. You pretty much have to cheese the boss to make it manageable and just get it into the damage phase and then get out of that room. Same thing with Scarlet Keep. You have to keep by the front door. If not, you're going to get pretty much overwhelmed, and as soon as ads start rushing you, you have to immediately focus on the ads, otherwise you are not making it through these encounters. Same thing for Devil's Lair. Pretty much anytime I beat Devil's Lair, I am in that room on the left. There is the occasional oopsie whenever Exploder Shanks run up, and it is still a very much hide in the room and hope we survive scenario. And then there's all of the heist battlegrounds and all the battlegrounds in general. They were initially made as a seasonal activity. And I remember Dado talking about this at a time, why battlegrounds were great was because of enemy density. It wasn't like a strike, it was basically a mission that just had 3 times the amount of ads that a normal strike would have. That does not translate well to a Grandmaster environment, because then it is 3 times the amount of ads, with 3 times the amount of health, double the flinch resistance, and all of the outgoing damage. So for instance, in the Heist Battleground Mars, what made the boss fight an annoying hell was the fact that the Darkblade Kelgaroth is pretty much unstoppable. You couldn't get him to flinch, he would walk towards you the entire time, and would occasionally blip out and come back. And ads were infinitely spawning, regardless of how much damage you did to them. As soon as you cleared the field of ads, there would be more ads. And when you got to the damage gap, and you had to get the Arc Charge Knights, when you're doing that, they spawn infinitely as well. Granted, I know it's a mechanic and you need the Arc Charges, but it was literally, you kill one Knight, you start working on the other one, the one you killed is already back up for another charge. And it's just... why Bungie thinks that repeatedly throwing these in the playlist, and I get 1, having A, Battlegrounds, have that as the hardest thing, that's okay. But 3? Come on, Bungie. I get that you took a few out of the rotation because they were too easy. I'd rather have reprised Arms Dealer, reprised freaking Inverted Spire. I would definitely rather have Bungie focusing on making a old strike they took out of the playlist new and making that current than just saying, oh, we're taking all of these battlegrounds and we're just gonna tweak the difficulty for Grandmaster. Because to me, that's just not worth it at all. Because then we're gonna have 3 Nightfalls that are going to be hard to farm for the broad population. Not to mention the fact that Lightblade is also hard to farm. Devil's Lair is probably the easiest Nightfall on the list, and I rate that as a medium difficulty one. Every season has had at least a Nightfall that was easy to farm. In this case, last season, it was Saber. While there is choke points that it can be difficult, it is pretty much easy and one of the easily farmable ones. None of these, I would say, is an easily farmed Nightfall. Because Devil's Lair is long and enemy dense. Scarlet Keep, long, enemy dense. Lightblade, long, while maybe not enemy dense, it's challenging enemy dense, where there's a lot of things that can be problems. All the Heist Battlegrounds, enemy density overload. Like, literally, they are infinite. In any scenario where you're stopping and defending a point, they will keep spewing ads at you. And nowadays, where double special heavy overload is now no longer a thing, and suspend was just nerfed into the ground, this section of Nightfalls is going to be the hardest we're going to see in the longest time. Not to mention the fact that it's going to make farming annoying, because there is a sect of weapons that are interesting. Warden's Law just got brought back. We have our first Nightfall bow. And still, I've never gotten a Depth Braytech Osprey, because the few times it's popped up, it's always been on a Nightfall that's not fun to go for. So, I don't know what Bungie is thinking, but it seems like they're trying to make Nightfalls another solo dungeon or Trials experience where they're just annoying to go for, and it's almost better just to not go for it. I get perseverance and trying is what Bungie wants. Basically, if you want it, go for it. You will be rewarded for trying. But this is just getting ridiculous at this point. I'd rather have a full array of just plain Nightfall strikes and play the same strikes season to season than see variety and having the hardest activities we've ever had in the Nightfall playlist multiple seasons in a row. It's tiring, and I just hope Bungie pays attention to that in the future. Either that or just take away the other 2 Heist Battlegrounds. Like, remove Mars, remove the Moon, and leave the Europa one, and then just throw 2 other strikes. I'd be perfectly fine with dealing with 1 in the Lightblade and having the rest just an easy strike. On that note, this rant is over. My name is Matt Scorpion, and I will see you in the next video.